Jim Walker. I'm at Perkins Coie in New York, and I'm co-lead of the compliance and enforcement arm of the FinTech practice. I spend most of my day listening to and advising various people who have started all sorts of blockchain projects, some AI-driven, not that much of AI-driven at this point, and trying to make sure that they don't go down a path that's going to get them into any sort of regulatory trouble, and sort of giving them some of the pitfalls, the roadmap for success, frankly. I've had a fair amount of experience in AI pre-blockchain, both in the securities regulation space and even outside of that. And so I have a fairly good idea from experience of the types of things that we need to navigate when we think about the combination of the two. AI creates an opportunity in blockchain to improve some of the basic functions, smart contracts, other things that you can do on the blockchain. Blockchain presents an opportunity to actually understand the data that is behind the AI, to at least put it on the blockchain, to understand provenance and things like that. But there are issues, and we'll get into that later.
Hello, everyone. My name is James Gibson, Dr. James Gibson, being formal. I'm both an educator as well as a serial entrepreneur. On the educational side, I really feel it's important to really disseminate information as far as the potential use cases for AI as well as blockchain. I think one of the lack of adoption reasons for not only AI, blockchain, or any of the emerging technologies is a lack of knowledge. So as we go about our daily business, I think one thing that we can do is help spread the knowledge, right? So once we spread the knowledge, that reduces the fear, and that allows for mass adoption to occur. On the entrepreneurial side, my focus, I'm in the ERP space, enterprise resource planning, so that's our software. And so with our software, we're looking to bring AI into our software, but more so, we're looking to bring our software onto the blockchain. That's going to bring additional transparency to the world of ERP, financial reporting and whatnot. So I'm happy to be here with you guys, and looking forward to this discussion.
And my name is Adrian Gardner. Good afternoon, good morning. I am a recovering federal executive. Think about that. So I spent about 30 years in federal service where I actually operate. I'm really an operator in roles as the Chief Information Officer for 4 different agencies. My last stint was I was a FEMA CIO. Prior to that, I was with NASA Goddard Space Flight Center here in Greenbelt. I also used to run the National Weather Service, which ran all weather data nationally and internationally. And then I spent about 17 years at Department of Energy, and eventually was the acting Chief Information Security Officer there. And we talk about blockchain and we talk about AI, we have to talk about supply chain. So my company, the Chain Block Company, looks at cybersecurity and supply chain and how we can actually bring those technologies together to be more protective, map the actual supply chain that occurs, so on and so forth. So one of the things I think is a broader application of blockchain is looking at supply chain resilience. How can we add it to the defense in depth approaches that are already in place, and then actually think about how we can scale that, right, across the 16 critical infrastructure sectors. So with that, let me toss it over to my colleague.
Hi, my name is Damon Bryant. I'm an assistant professor at Morgan State University. I started off as really a soldier in the military, then transitioned to become a national security officer. After serving and during my government time, it's the case, I've created a startup, raised a few $1 million, exited that, and then moved into the tech space, particularly at Facebook, where I was the global director of selection. And then I transitioned to the educational testing service, where I helped to develop computer adaptive tests. So all of you who take the SAT or the GRE or any of the other adaptive tests that are administered using artificial intelligence, those algorithms that were used, I maintained those algorithms used at the Educational Testing Service. Now I'm at Morgan State in the graduate program in psychology and neuroscience. So it's the case that I'm currently involved in integrating blockchain and AI into higher education, and I'll speak a little bit more about that later.
All right. So I think in the past year, we've seen a tremendous sort of growth of the use of AI. And here I'm thinking about ChatGPT. In my organization, we use it quite heavily for blockchain development. So in your areas of expertise, what is the impact of AI? And we could talk about ChatGPT, for example. For Damon in entrepreneurship, in psychology, Adrian cybersecurity, James, in basically education and engineering, and yourself from a legal perspective, other copyright issues, for example. So how is AI affecting your different interests?
So for me, in the law firm, because I am at Perkins Coie is very much a technology-forward law firm, because we basically want to be able to advise everybody in technology. We have been, I think, somewhat in the forefront in really pushing different sorts of AI tools in our practice. So we're constantly testing new tools and seeing whether or not they can help us in our practice of law. And so we're dealing with it in terms of, here are products that are law practice based. Does this work for you? And it's tricky because, it's particularly with generative AI, there are real, pitfalls. Of course, there are the various cases with ChatGPT where it's like, ChatGPT is not really meant for lawyers, not quite yet. It's better, but it hallucinates, for example, on sites, and that's a problem because you'll tell a court that there's a proposition that's supported by various cases that don't exist. But there are other tools that work fairly well, but there's a question of what you have to do to have confidence in the AI, and we spend a fair amount of time thinking about that.
Again, speaking from both the entrepreneurial front as well as the educational front, on the entrepreneurial front, we're seeing a lot of progress. Again, my business is software-related, ERP specifically, but we're seeing a lot of positive efficiencies being brought by the use of AI, but at the same time, as the brother here mentioned, supply chain. We're big on supply chain and traceability and transparency. So really excited about bringing the blockchain into the ERP space because again, that's going to really give that transparency all the way to the end, to the roots of the origin of the product delivery to its end user. So again, having that visible on the blockchain really is going to enhance the ability for our software, our ERP systems, really to provide that traceability that is so sought after today. But again, on the AI side, we're already using AI in our software. We're using AI to assist with our customer service. Customers can call into our companies and whatnot, and now they can speak to the AI and have routine tasks such as order entry, such as inventory, supply levels, called out and spoken to by the AI assistant as opposed to using the human intelligence at this point. So a lot of positive advances. Again, the entirety of it is really to look to bring efficiencies into our organization. So.
I would simply say AI is here to stay, and especially within the developer community. What we're seeing is that natural language processing combined with AI, I now look at my developer team in a very different way. In other words, AI is playing more of a central role in the way that I develop tools and technology, right? And so to the young folks in the crowd, right, if you are not a stellar developer, stellar coder, what I would say is you need to begin to think about how you become more conversant and how AI can be used to actually develop software. So, because we're already seeing it in the workplace, right? We're seeing where we were, eventually at some point we hired about 7 people last year. All 7 of those folks had offers before they came to us, a little small black company, right? And so And I'm talking from MIT, Arizona State, Morris Brown, so on and so forth, right? All with 3.8, 3.9 GPAs, right? So I'm just saying it's going to change the competitive landscape of the developer community and the way that we actually code. I think it'll have the same impact, obviously, on blockchain. And so I think we need to just prepare for that and prepare our students. I think our guidance counselors right now need to be having conversations with computer engineers, software engineers, so on and so forth in those disciplines, and really now doing a quick course correct where they are embracing that, because that is a needed skill where you can embrace AI, natural language processing, to actually now create software. That is a skill.
Yes, just to touch on it, AI has been used in higher education for well over about 25, almost going on 30 years with higher admissions. So when you sit down to take the SAT, as I mentioned before, the MCAT, the LSAT, all of these standardized tests are administered using artificial intelligence. So these algorithms have been the target of certain foreign entities that have been trying to acquire that technology. For instance, back during when COVID first started, the Educational Testing Service had a concern that the content was being compromised. So it was the case within the Institute, we found that through both human intelligence and through other forms of being able to steal information, the Chinese had been able to steal all of the intellectual property owned by the Educational Testing Service. So when you talk about accountability, I think blockchain helps us to be able to track and trace any of the intellectual property that's stolen. So we saw it that they stole all of the content, the questions and answers, in addition to all of the algorithms used to administer those computer adaptive tests. So when you all heard during COVID that they're going to stop administering the SAT and the GRE, it was not because of COVID, because the institution was looking to make money. It was because the Chinese had pilfered and stolen all of that content. So it's the point now that blockchain will allow us to track and trace all of the content that we are developing and administering in the K through 12 space. But it's the case now because the field has been somewhat reset. Our HBCUs can begin the process of developing our own assessment tools and have our own set of credentials in the space. Some of you might have heard earlier this week, the president made an announcement that the National Science Foundation awarded about $10.5 million to a consortium of schools. Within that consortium, it was a total of 12 of us. I'm the primary investigator at Morgan State. I'm helping to implement AI and blockchain technology at HBCUs. And Howard University, yes, is one of those institutions that are involved in that process. So we're now piloting blockchain-based credentials and AI-based assessments for continuous educational workforce credentialing, all in the natural sciences, all within STEM, within enhancing and building research capacity at our HBCUs. So it's the case that we're not just talking about it, so we're doing it by just grabbing the bull by the horns and just riding out.
From your standpoint, what are the key considerations for individuals in adopting these three technologies: AI, blockchain, and cybersecurity tools? The question is open to anyone.
If I heard the question right, you're asking what are the keys that are gonna bring about more adoption of the technology.
Yeah, what are the key considerations?
Okay. And again, kind of going back to my opening, I feel that one of the biggest movers of adoption is going to be knowledge, right? Again, we just, as individuals, we just have a fear of unknown. We don't want to be guinea pigs. So as we can share and spread knowledge, right, that's going to break down these walls of fear. And I believe that's what's going to lead to a lot more adoption across the spectrum, not only in my field, but across the spectrum.
I think a huge consideration is solving the power problem. Just as proof of work requires a lot of power to run for mining, AI-driven tools can take a lot of power. And the combination of AI and blockchain, depending, that's a real issue. So I think it's important that people start putting their heads to how to deal with that issue, because it's sort of ahead of time, since that's something that sort of long-term will make a difference for adoption. And then, of course, I would agree, knowledge and also navigation of what it is that you're building with this product. If you're, so for example, and I'm going to go back to the regulation panel, if you're doing something that involves financial products or something of that nature, if there's some thought that that's part of it, you are going to have to think about regulation because there are various regimes that overlook that. And so you want to make sure that you get counsel ahead of time so that you navigate a path that will work for you.
Yeah, just to add one fact on your point on power. I saw it, I had at a conference, the cost of using 1 megawatt of energy for a blockchain data center is $1 million, but using the same energy for an AI data center is $5 million. So you can see, I mean, that was a great point. So.
Yeah, I think the other thing I would say is just diversity of thought. I mean, we have young, black, and gifted across these HBCU campuses, right? And I mean, the thing that I fear is that they will feel complacent or feel displaced. And I want to turn that to say this is a huge opportunity to participate, right? So as you were just stating from a standpoint of Morgan State, the same thing is happening on the quantum side. If you haven't looked up quantum computing, don't ask me to explain it, because guess what? There isn't a standard definition for it. They're struggling with that right now. But you being in those rooms and being sort of engaged in that discussion, because they're really at the point of trying to define it in a way that the population, larger concept can really consume it, is absolutely a good thing. But this whole thing of diversity of thought, neural diversity, I mean, this whole thing, we have to look at the workforce differently, right? So people with Asperger's are now, this is actually their time where they can actually excel far beyond some of us. I will say as an old man, far beyond me, right? And so what I will say is that this whole thing of diversity of thought. And the other thing I think on the HBCU side is, I may be wrong about this, but this is what I find is that, when I was my generation coming through, when somebody said I couldn't do something, I actually said, I'm gonna prove you wrong, right? I fear right now with some of the mental health challenges that our students are facing, that when they hear that, they actually shrink down and believe that. And what I'm saying is we in the classroom, anytime we're engaging a black professional, whether they are at an HBCU or not, or even in the workplace, we need to prop them up, right? And I mean that, so I'm really talking also mentoring, protege, but also saying, hey, I'm here to listen, because I might not have gone through what you've gone through, but you have a kind ear to listen to what you're going through. So I really want to make sure that we leave our folks with that, because I think it's extremely important at this given time, 2024, and get out and vote. That's all I can say. Go ahead.
The thing that I would encourage is just for us to become more practical. If you're going to learn about the technology, it's not about going to a top HBCU. It's not going to an Ivy League school to pick up computer science. No, you can learn it. You can learn everything that you need to learn by going on Facebook. It's the case you can buy some books from like Kindle, Amazon Kindle, and just build something. Get it out there. The market will tell you if you are building something right or wrong. The market will tell you if it's the case that you can monetize what you're attempting to build upon. So it's the case that all of the feedback that we need, it's in the environment, it's around us. We have people that we can give our product to. So I would encourage you, once again, if you would like to get into the blockchain space or begin to get into the AI space, start building. Don't worry about what other people think. At the end of the day, so your feedback will come from the market. So the market will dictate, how you navigate. So that's all that I have.
Yeah, and if I can just chime in on one thing you said is, I mean, at NASA Goddard and all the places I've been, I have hired folks from all spectrums of the universities. Every time I've had to retrain them. In other words, what I'm saying is you may come with a de minimis level skill set. I don't care if you're from Morehouse, Tuskegee, where I went, or MIT or Stanford. When you came into the workplace, I still had to retrain you and actually get you to a place where you could operate within the environment. So what he's saying about this whole thing about degrees, it's really just, to me, it's not really valid, especially given that the resources that are online, access to information that we have now, it's an equalizer.
All right. So looking at the future prospects of these technologies, we're headed towards a world of artificial general intelligence, AGI. And this is basically when AI becomes smarter than the smartest human. So what is the likely impact of AGI to communities, and particularly the Black communities? Do you see a positive impact? And if the impact is negative, can we use cybersecurity tools and blockchain to regulate AGI?
So my first thought on that is the impact on Black communities depends on the input. The danger with AI is the bias that can happen. And there's a really simple example that someone taught me on an AI panel some years ago that really sort of, it tells a story. When they first invented those towel dispensers in bathrooms, they did it by flashing hands in front of these machines and having them recognized. They only used white hands. So when they first rolled out these things, and we would go in there and try to get this stupid paper to come out, we'd be waving our hands like fools, and nothing would happen, because they didn't use us as an example. And so now, mind you, I'm not quite sure that they've gotten much better, because I still find myself like running around like, where's the towel? But that just sort of is an example of, if we aren't included in the data sets, then we're not going to become the output of the program. Now, what blockchain at least does for us is it provides an opportunity to understand the data set, to put it on the blockchain, to understand where the image is ultimately coming from, and to test whether or not that derivation included us in the program.
I agree with all that, but I also want to add that as we continue to see the intersection of AI and blockchain, I think they're going to feed off one another. I think there are things that blockchain offers that is needed in AI, meaning transparency, as you were just saying, right? If we don't have the right input, right, then we're not going to get the right output. We're not going to be included, right? So the biases are going to come to light. So when we bring everything onto the blockchain, we do have that transparency. So what we can do is we can have AI bots that can actually read the AI interpretation and read whether or not we have been included, right? So again, I think we're moving to the point where we're going to get to decentralized artificial intelligence. And once we have decentralized artificial intelligence, that's really going to kind of unlock the door to detecting these biases, right? Because again, right now, with AI being centralized, the input is controlled, right? So the output is determined, right? So when we have the decentralized AI, where we have multiple entities, right, that are contributing to the feeding, to the training of the AI, right? Now we're, as well as, again, it being put on the blockchain, now we have a defined traceability that ensures that we have been included, right? So I think that's where we're headed, and that's where we're gonna see the biases get, I don't want to say fully eliminated, but they're gonna be brought to light.
Yeah, I would say that we need to leverage conferences like this, and also I think we need to grow our own, right? I mean, I know we have to rely on the infrastructure that exists, but I think there's also an opportunity through financing also to create our own, so that we can address the bias, right? I think the other thing is the reality that the launch of AI is truly right now, as we're experiencing, has been a soft launch, believe it or not, right? And it's been slowly encroaching into our lives. Let me give you just one little example that I showed my son, right? So think about when you used to check out at the store, whether it be Target, Home Depot, so on and so forth, right? So now when I went into Home Depot recently up on Rhode Island Avenue, right, you go up and you used to interface with an individual. So look at the number of individuals now it takes for you to check out. Second thing is, now when you're coming up to the Home Depot, they're taking you're swiping your card, they're actually taking a facial. And I don't remember opting into that, right? So, I mean, this whole issue of privacy concerns and all of that stuff, I think is just slowly creeping and encroaching into our lives, right? And I'm saying slowly, but it's really probably underneath the underlying infrastructure is moving at light speed, right? And so, I don't know what they're doing with that picture, right? I don't know if that's going to a database, and now if I get stopped for a ticket, right, they can now boom, 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 check that, link it to my credit card, which is what they did, right, when I checked out, right? So I'm just saying, I think we need to be wary and very mindful about what's happening and the underlying, because it's sort of like, the frog in a pot. They're slowly turning the temperature up, and next thing you know, I'm gonna be a floater, right? And so I'm saying to you, it's really encroaching into our lives, both academically and our professional lives and also our personal lives. So I would just make sure we look at the privacy piece of it and be wary of what's happening.
Yeah, just to chime on that point, because it's been happening in educational testing for a while, I've seen it where it has occurred at the K through 12 level with accountability testing, particularly with the No Child Left Behind Act. With the No Child Left Behind Act, when they mandated state testing, I was hired as a consultant by the Department of Education to go in and look at Florida's accountability test. And in analyzing that test, I noticed that all of the content was biased. It was biased, but yet the administrators, the schools, the district, and the state, they were making decisions based upon that biased information. And it had become commonplace to where all the students, they would take the test, and then decisions would be made, and as a result, schools would be shut down, teachers would be fired, communities would be disrupted, but yet it's the case that the educational assessment itself was biased, but nobody even knew it was taking place. I'm like, okay, help me out. You're taking a third grade math test, but in order to pass the third grade math test, you had to be able to read at a 7th grade level. Tell me, how is that fair? It's the case, anyone who's developing the test, they're just going on the specifications, but seeing it implemented in the communities, it wreaked havoc. But yet it's the case, when you point that out to everybody, and everybody, the state legislator, they're looking at it, and they say, oh no, that's not fair. No shit, excuse my French. But it's the case, it's commonplace now, and it's the same thing is happening in terms of college admissions. So when we look at the educational assessments and how they've been administered, it's the case that same data and that same bias has been built into the assessments themselves. But there are policies and procedures that are in place at these institutions that reinforce it. In my class, I teach to my graduate students, there's a book that I use that's called Systematic Racism in Educational Assessments, which talks about how standardized tests have had biases, institutional racism built into the process, and how that subsequently influences how the tests are calibrated, how the parameters within the algorithm are used to administer the questions. So it's the case, in reading that book, it's bringing a level of consciousness to the students to look at how the data is biased and the policies and procedures are biased against our groups. So long story short, yes, the bias is there, and I think we need a lot of policies and procedures to be able to help mitigate the bias in the data.
Awesome. Can we give our panelists a round of applause? I think we have a minute or two for one question. Does anyone have a question? You can go to the mic, please. Yes, please.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Victor Rogers. Gentlemen, I appreciate what you got going on. Just open to trying to figure out, are there any AI tools or resources that you could share with the crowd for people who are interested in like scaling their knowledge, really passionate about sharing that kind of information, and y'all got like the brains I want to like just, learn from?
I'll take the first stab. I think one of the easiest tools to get that elementary information and education is ChatGPT. I mean, it's out there, it's available. Talk to ChatGPT just like you're talking to a friend, right? It's really easy. You'll be amazed at how far you can go down that rabbit hole. I would suggest that as a starting point. It's out there, it's available, it's free, it's easy.
Yeah, I would totally agree. The great thing about ChatGPT, and someone surprised me with this, we were doing a panel about ChatGPT, and they said, okay, I'll organize the agenda and what we're going to talk about. And they sent us something. I said, oh, that's great. And I said, how'd you come up with these? You said, I use ChatGPT. And literally, for teaching, for just sort of gathering information, giving you an idea of what's there, it's really good for that. I don't know if there's better resources. There may be, but.
Yeah, for synthesizing knowledge, particularly for like scientists, and like if you want to come up to speed on like research papers, a good place is AI Rabbit. So it's a tool that you could put in certain terms and it'll bring up the papers that are associated with it, the ones that aren't necessarily credible. It will be able to filter that information out for you using graph theory.
And just general, just because I know we have zero time left, the one I use daily is Perplexity. I don't know if you've used that before, but I love it because it actually gives references. So if you're doing citations, you can actually pull that down. It really helps your your mental sort of process as far as getting from point A to point B. I don't know if you were just asking about like coding in AI, but that's the one I use daily. Perplexity. I think the gentleman right there is familiar with it. AI Rabbit is what you said.
Yeah. Thank you, gentlemen.